Home is where your story begins, but what happens when you leave it behind? I'm your host, Aditya Mehta, and this is Diasporaa, where each week we share inspiring stories of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent who left everything they knew and are building something entirely new while staying connected to their roots. Today, we are joined by Heena Narula. She's a teacher who builds adult learning and development programs. Originally from Delhi in India, she has had stints in Pune and Bangalore, where she had her own school and an edtech startup, and she moved to Vancouver with her partner Akhil in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. So lots to unpack here. Heena, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
A recurring theme in my show is I ask my guests what their hometown would be if it were a city in the US or Canada. So what would Delhi be if it were a North American city?
Not Vancouver for sure, but
Sure, I
I
agree.
think, I think it's very difficult to think of Delhi as any North American city because
Yeah,
Delhi has a very deep cultural history. So
yeah,
it was, destroyed and rebuilt 7 times. So it's really
yeah,
hard to compare it. So I would just say it's not Vancouver for sure.
yeah. Yeah, Vancouver has the personality of a yoga instructor, is
Yeah,
what I always say. So
that's true.
that's definitely not Delhi. You mentioned earlier to me that your family is originally from the Pakistan side of Punjab province, and in partition they came over to the Indian side and settled into what is now Haryana. So back then that was all Punjab province, and then your dad moved to Delhi. So tell our listeners a little bit more about the partition and families who had to move from here to there or there to here, and how that impacts your psyche. 'Cause it was one of the most traumatic experiences in civilization. I think 14 million people had to move
Yeah.
in a short period of time. So tell us a little bit more about the partition.
Yeah, so when India got freedom from British rule in 1947, they basically drew a random line between India and Pakistan and
Yeah,
basically made Pakistan being the Muslim state and India being the Hindu state. So all the non-Muslims were supposed to move from Pakistan, and my
yeah,
grandparents, both my grandfather and grandmother on my father's side, they both were from Lahore, so they both had to move. They were pretty young at that point
yeah,
in time, and they both moved to Haryana and found their way to each other. And yeah, like you mentioned, it was definitely one of the most traumatic experiences because when you're
yeah.
moving your life, you can't take everything with you. They
Sure.
had their own land there, they had
Yeah,
their own houses. And of course, there's a lot of documentaries now to learn more about the partition's history and how they couldn't bring their materialistic possessions with them.
yeah,
So it was definitely a traumatic experience for them that they carried with themselves. When my father moved from Haryana to Delhi for work pursuits, it was a very different kind of displacement. It was not forced. It was something that
right,
he chose. And
right.
when I did that in 2020, it was again a choice. But I feel like, going to a new land and building your life from scratch is something that runs in the blood for us. And it was a lot easier for me because of, what my father and my grandfather had to go through to
Yeah,
build the life that I had before coming here.
that's great.
Yeah.
We've had the good fortune of exploring this from different angles, where we've had, so you moved from Punjab to Punjab, right? Like Pakistani Punjab to Indian Punjab. So you at least had people speaking that language around you.
Yeah.
We had a guest whose family moved from Sindh province, and there was no Sindh on the India side. So, that was a very different angle that we explored. And soon I'm hoping to have a guest who is Hindu who chose to stay back in Pakistan. So that's going to be another angle that I'm very excited to explore. So, what was growing up in Delhi like? How were your early days in childhood?
Yeah, it was really nice. Like I loved, being in the capital city of the country because when you live in a big city, you have access to resources that you may not have growing up in a
Yeah,
small city. I think it was second year of my university when I really wanted to learn more about Delhi. I don't know why, but there was just deep curiosity and I read a lot of books on Delhi. I used to
yeah,
go for these cultural tours and, go to these monuments, which would talk about the cultural and historical significance of all the rulers that have come to Delhi. So learned a lot about the city that I called home, and that brought with it a lot of pride. However, I have to say the Delhi that I fell in love with is no longer the Delhi I left, and it has changed a lot. Even today, like it's just no longer the city I grew up in. So there's definitely like changes that have happened that I have not been able to embrace the way I would have liked.
What's an example of such a change?
For example, pollution, like,
Oh, yeah.
pollution has been in Delhi, like right after Diwali or in general because of
Yeah.
stubble burning, Delhi just gets like days and days of
Yeah.
haze, which was
Yeah.
not the case when we were
Right.
growing up. So,
Right.
yeah.
I've realized that sometimes the city changes, like you said, but sometimes your expectations from the city change, and
That
the
is true.
city no longer fits even if it's remained the same, you know?
Yeah.
Like the part of Bombay I live in, it's an old colonial part of the city. There's a lot of history. That part of Bombay has hardly changed, right? Maybe there's a few more skyscrapers. But what I need from my hometown has changed so much that Bombay doesn't fit me that well anymore. So there's, just a couple of ways to explore that. You spent some time with Teach for India. So tell us more about what that program is and what was most fulfilling for you in being part of that program.
Yeah, so Teach for India is a 2-year fellowship program, and it's very similar to Teach for America. They basically have this program all across the world now. And for those 2 years, you're placed in a under-resourced public or a private school in the city you
Okay.
choose. And they basically choose, the recent graduates or people who are really willing to spend 2 years in
Yeah.
service. And I got a chance to work with grade 3 and grade 4 in a municipal school in North Delhi. And for me, till date, it's been more than a decade now, but till date, it has been the most rewarding experience. And the reason I
Yeah.
say that is that when you are a teacher in a classroom, you're the one who's taking away the most. Because when you
Yeah.
teach, you're teaching yourself more than anybody else. So
Yeah.
that has been definitely the most rewarding experience. And I had a classroom of 50 girls. So just that was my way to, contributing to female education in an under-resourced, underprivileged
Yeah.
community. So
A couple of points to make here. One, in this part of the world, everybody tells the armed forces, thank you for your service. I think teachers are just as deserving of that gratitude. So thank
Yeah.
you for your service as a teacher. And
Thank you.
the second thing was that I think education is the number one way to uplift anybody's life for generations.
Yeah.
I'm part of the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship here as a donor. And in India, what we would do is, every company has a corporate gifting budget for Diwali. We would take that budget, and instead of sending sweets and dry fruits to people's homes, we would use it to pay for the education of a couple of girl students. And the school initially wanted us to, and this was a direct donation to the school. So, there's no risk of someone not spending the money properly, etc. The girls had to keep a certain grade. And we said, instead of funding lots of fees for 1 month, I would like to follow through with one student throughout their life. And we paid for, I think, 8 years worth of education eventually. And, she passed high school. And my favorite part about this, she doesn't know who I am. So
That's
it's
remarkable.
for us, it's an anonymous donor. And our clients also loved it very much. That, yeah, sure, you're going to send me a mug or a pen. What's
Yeah.
that value of that versus paying for somebody's generational upliftment, right?
Yeah, changing someone's life.
Yeah, exactly. Great. I really enjoyed that conversation. Tell me more about your entrepreneurship experience. What was the edtech startup all about?
Yeah, so I was basically responsible for building an international product for a company which already had a domestic product. So it was like a startup within a startup, because while
Nice.
they had a domestic product, they had to, like, it had to be changed. You cannot offer the same product to the international audience. The price point was different. So I was the number 2 in the team, and it was very interesting because, one, I got a chance to learn more about how people learn all across the world, how some of these cultural practices actually impact learning, and what kind of expectations they have from online education, because online education at that point in time, and this is 2019 when nobody was talking about this, was quite different. So I got a chance to work with multiple teams that way, learning more about the sales process, customer success, product development. And yeah, it grew really fast. I started off with 20 learners, and 3 months later we were already at 600 learners. It grew so fast that we couldn't even catch our breath. But I think that also gave me an opportunity to understand the hustle side of me, which I kind of say that, us being brown people, hustle runs in our veins. And that was my opportunity to really discover that.
Would you call it jugaad by any chance?
Not so much. I think Jugaad is definitely something that you would know about, how to go about it as an Indian for sure. But it was very calculated. I would say that, a lot of analysis and a lot of critical thinking went around it. So it was not that we were shooting in the dark. We knew
Right,
what we
that
were
makes sense.
doing.
We discussed Jugaad a few episodes ago with Priyanka Desai. She's a film director, and her studio is called Jugaad Studios.
Okay.
So we talked about it. So yeah, I see what it means in your context. Like it's not a shot in the dark, which is what Jugaad is. In an uncertain environment, you're trying to make something happen, right? Using unconventional means. So I see the difference here. What got you to decide to move abroad?
I think it was a decision that was partly driven by my partner. He really wanted a big change in our lives. And I think it also came at a point when both of us were burnt out. So, all that hustle did tire me out. And at the end, I just really needed a hard reset. And I was sure that I would not get that hard reset, staying where I was. So
Yeah.
moving to Canada really brought that, and
Yeah.
also realized that I wanted to do a lot more things on the personal side of my life, which I was not getting the opportunity to. So moving to Canada really gave me that pathway and
Yeah.
helped me a
So
lot.
was the starting point more like we want to leave India, or was it more like we want to move abroad? Because leaving a place and going to a place are two different mindsets. I
Yeah.
wanted to leave India. And so I didn't have any game plan of what I'm actually going to do once I leave, right? And that's part one of the question. And part two is, was it always Canada you knew, or you kind of reached that conclusion through some analysis?
Yeah, well, initially for me, it was like a 2-year commitment. Like I left thinking that, we'll just explore this for a couple of years and then
Yeah.
maybe move back. Primarily
Yeah.
because I wasn't so deeply entrenched in the social impact space that, I
Yeah.
felt that is something that I would love to continue contributing to. But of course, things changed after I came here and I saw what my life is. So I would say it really started off from moving abroad rather than leaving India, because that narrative is very
Okay.
different. And we did explore other options too. Like we were not really set on a particular country. We were just trying to look
Okay.
for a place where we can find our own community and where
Yeah.
we will be easily accepted. Like being a brown person, being a BIPOC person, it was something that, and being a BIPOC woman, it was even more important for me to go to a place where I
Sure.
would be accepted and I'm not considered an outsider. And when I moved
Yeah.
to Pune, when I lived in Pune for 2 years, that's where I started my school and ran my school. I was the outsider. I was the only person on my team
Yeah.
who did not know Marathi, the local
Yeah.
language of Pune. So for
Yeah.
me, like I figured how to carve my own space and create my own community, but I also wanted to do it in a place that feels a little bit familiar. Truth be told, we both had never been to Canada before that. So we just
Yeah.
packed our bags and moved to Vancouver without having been here before. So it was
Yeah.
really like shot in the dark that way, but I'm glad it worked out for us.
Yeah. What other countries did you briefly consider before narrowing down on Canada?
Yeah, so we were considering some, like Australia was one, especially
Yeah.
because of their pathways to immigration. We also considered a pathway where, one of us were considering higher studies and the other person would, come along. So we were
Sure.
thinking of Scandinavia as one. But seeing all the options, I think Canada seemed like the most viable option for us.
And was it always going to be Vancouver, or?
Interesting story there too. So since we were moving during the pandemic, we
Yeah.
both wanted to ensure that one of us had a job before we moved in. And my partner got his job in Vancouver before we even moved here. So it made our
Wow.
choice a lot easier. And yeah,
That's pretty
how we-
rare to get a job even before you move. So what kind of job was it?
He's in sales. So it was a
Okay.
SaaS sales job, but because he
Great.
was with a similar startup in India, so it was a lot easier for him to get
That
that
makes sense.
job. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, a common theme on the show has been the survival job that people have to do when they are new immigrants. So seems like you got to skip that step when you moved.
Yeah, we definitely
Yeah.
did. I had to wait for a few months, but yes, we didn't
Yeah.
go for a survival.
Yeah, my wife and I also were clear that we're not going to do that. I was obviously running my startup at the time, but it's nothing wrong with doing it. But I think if it's a survival job that's getting you into the profession that you want to do, you're like, if you want to go to like investment banking and your survival job is a teller at the bank, that's still fine. I think that's
Yeah.
actually strategically a good thing because then you can move within the bank. But then just going to, let's say, an Amazon warehouse while actually you want to be a food technician, right? It's that probably may not make sense. Did you use one of these express entry programs that they had set up at the time, like the federal
Yeah.
skilled workers?
Yeah, we came through the express entry program. Yes.
Yeah. How long did your PR process take?
I think we submitted probably a few 8 to 9 months. I think things got
Okay.
delayed because of COVID. Like we were supposed to get
Sure.
our passports stamped by January 2020,
Okay.
but they got stamped in March 2020. But then national
Okay.
lockdown happened, so our passports were stuck with them till
Oh
June.
no.
So we
Yeah.
got our passports on 24th June, and 29th June we were here. So not
Wow.
much of a big window for us to really move our
Yeah.
life, but we
Mm-hmm.
had to make that move because it comes with an expiry. Like if you don't land within that timeline, then you have to
Mm-hmm.
apply
Yeah.
again. And we were just worried
Yeah.
that because of COVID, we didn't know how
Yeah.
long it's going to take. So we wanted to make sure that, we are making the most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons for starting Diaspora is people coming in COVID and being locked down, not able to work, not able to go anywhere. They don't know anything about anything. They don't know what they don't know, right? So it was to help those people assimilate better and find other people in a similar situation. My PR took 3 weeks. It was
Wow.
2017. We applied for it, and the next day I got an ITA, the invitation to apply. And we were
Interesting.
on top of our documents, and we had everything submitted, including the medical, in 4 or 5 days. And then in like less than 2 weeks, we got the call to send our passports. Like I was blown away by how quick it was. And I had just spent the whole of 2017 trying to move to the US on a L1 through my own startup subsidiary. And contrasting to that, like I said earlier, for me, it was about I want to leave India versus, I want to go to this place. So when that US thing didn't happen and Canada took 3 weeks, I was like, this is a universe conspiring to get me to the place where I'm eventually meant to be. And we did have a gap. We got this in November, but it was probably April by the time we showed up. And for us, it was always going to be Vancouver because, we were moving for quality of life and not necessarily as economic migrants. And I would argue there is no better place than Vancouver when it comes to quality of life anywhere.
That is true. Yeah.
So that's how our story came by. And the first day we got to the hotel by the airport and we opened the curtains and you could see the North Shore Mountains with snow on them.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm in the right place. Because like you, my wife had never been to Canada before. I had been to Canada before, but 1 week in Banff and Jasper National Parks, and then 1 day in Vancouver before getting a cruise ship to Alaska. So that was pretty limited experience as well. Let's take a short break now, and when we return, we can continue talking about your immigration journey and your early days in Canada. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Imagine home. The smell of coffee, the sound of a lawnmower, the sun's warmth on your face. Free to be yourself, surrounded by love that helps you grow. This is a place to call home. That's an American dream we all deserve. But in 50% of US states, you could legally be denied housing if you are LGBTQ+. Get the facts and hear real stories at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
Are you ready to discover remarkable stories of resilience and cultural connection? This is Diasporaa, a show sharing the journeys of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent now building their lives in North America. Inspiring, insightful, and always engaging, Diasporaa offers a unique perspective on the immigrant experience. Join me, Aditya Mehta, my guests, on the Diasporaa Show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. right here on KKNW.
Working hard to put a smile on your face. Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Diasporaa on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from the Indian subcontinent. We are talking to Heena Narula, a teacher and not-so-recent immigrant in Vancouver, BC. Before talking to Heena, I want to take a moment to remind you to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. You can find all our episodes in video format right from the first one. So, Heena, you said within a few days of getting your passport stamped, you were already in Vancouver. What were those first early days like and we'll pick this from many perspectives, but from a culture shock perspective, what were quirks you noticed? What was oddly different that you observed in those first few days?
Yeah, well, for the first 2 weeks, we were locked in an Airbnb because we were supposed
Quarantine?
to do that. Yes.
Okay.
We also came by these repatriation flights, which were running between
Oh,
India and Canada. So there were no commercial flights that were being run.
yeah.
Thankfully, Justin Trudeau announced that anyone who has had their passport stamped before 18th of March were still allowed to enter
Hmm?
as PRs. So ours got I think 2-3 days before that. So we were still
Wow.
allowed to enter the country, but
Yeah.
it was the flight experience in itself was very different. Like we had to wear these
Right.
PPE kits, like personal protective
Yeah.
equipment. And it was quite stressful for sure because our parents were like scared, that we are going to a new country. We've never been, and that too in the time when,
Yeah.
everything is just on fire.
My son was born in November of 19,
Okay.
and in Jan of 2020 we went to India with he was 2 months old. There was COVID was just like unknown. We
Yeah.
actually flew Air China and passed through Beijing, and we
Wow.
were like, why are all these people wearing these masks? And I came back in a couple of weeks, but my wife and son eventually they got stuck. What was eventually going to be for almost 6 months, and they came back on one of these flights where my son was 8 months old, and my wife, alone with him, came on one of these Vande Bharat repatriation flights. So
Yeah.
I remember how stressful those days were. But once you got here and you finished your quarantine, what were some of the quirks you noticed?
It was beautiful. We came around like summer, so July,
Yeah.
and we also came prepared that we're going to be exploring the city like tourists because everything was so new
Sure.
for us. So we noticed that, there's so many things to do,
Yeah.
and, everyone is involved in some or the other sport. We were like, okay, maybe we came to the right place. I mean, we had seen some videos of Vancouver, but it was still very different, coming here. I think
Yeah.
in those early days, one thing I really appreciated was lack of tourists. Like the city was
Yeah.
not as crowded. So we would go
Yeah.
and bike the seawall like 3 times a week and not see as many
Yeah.
people. There were no cruise ships. So it was definitely
Yeah.
nice that way, but also a lot of restaurants were closed, had
Right.
to be in your bubble, and we didn't know anybody. We were
Yeah.
completely new here, no community,
Yeah.
and no family, just
Yeah.
nobody. But we were also like really determined that, we're going to carve out our space. We're going to build our community. We're going to make this work.
Yeah.
So yeah, those initial days were definitely interesting to see what kind of things people do here, how people
Yeah.
dress up,
Sure.
observing all those things. But at the same time, you're not too far away from your community here. You will see people like you. You're walking on the street, you will see people
Yeah.
like you and, people who dress up like you. So you never feel that you're a complete outsider, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. Did you move to Surrey or did you move to some other place?
We were in downtown. We were
Yeah.
not sure where we'll find work, and we didn't know
Yeah.
like if we had to commute to work. So we
Yeah.
felt like downtown would be the best way to
Yeah.
spend our time. Yeah.
I think that's a great thing to do because what happens is you're the average of the people you surround yourself with, right?
That is true.
And a lot of Indians seeking comfort, which is absolutely a fair thing to do. They land in Surrey, or if they go to Toronto, they go to Brampton. They're surrounded by everyone around them, and then that shared experience becomes their perception of Canada. And I saw these two couples come in from Bombay around the same time you did. And both, the husband was in finance, the wife was in marketing. And both of them similar age, no kids, right? And one moved to downtown and one moved to Surrey. And if you see their trajectory in the last 5 years, the one that's in downtown have flourished. They've built a life like how you have. And they've just done so well in every aspect of their life. And they're outdoorsy. They do all this fun stuff. The Surrey couple, it was always too far to come for networking events. It was so on and so forth. Everybody told them to get a survival job. They got disillusioned and they moved back to India after 3 years saying there's no opportunity in Canada. And I said, but have you actually been to Canada? You've been to mini India. And of course, it's a comfort and it's something that you should always indulge in. Like, we'll go to Surrey to watch a Bollywood movie and eat some Indian buffet, right? Even from Seattle, we do it sometimes. But we were also very clear that we were going to be in downtown. And if it costs more money, it's going to bring opportunities with it. So we have to figure out how we'll spend that much extra, because what it will give us back is going to be absolutely worth it. It comes down to the abundance versus scarcity mindset often as well. So when you were living in downtown, when I moved in 2018, I never saw that many Indian people in downtown. But by the time now I go back, then it's a completely different picture. So do you feel that has a similar thing has happened in your experience? Like there's a lot more Indian population just everywhere, but especially in downtown than there used to be?
I think so, but I think that's also because of return to office. Now that more people have to go to the office, people prefer to live closer to the office so that they're not spending as much time in commute. So I think that is the shift here. I do feel that it really comes from a place of like what mindset you're bringing in, but also how much you're willing to embrace the change. I think when we move to a different country, we want to be surrounded by things that bring us comfort. And, we in any way, like be it through food, be it through community, like just being able to see people like us. Whenever I felt that I needed that, I was willing to go to Surrey. But at the same time, like the reason why I came here was to gain a global perspective, to meet people from different cultures and learn more about them and gain that perspective that can only be gained when you live in a multicultural society, which was not the case, in India. Because, well, yes, like every state is different, language is different. It was still very similar. There were still some common threads across the states, but that was not the case, in Canada.
Yeah. Where did you find your first friend?
In Canada?
Yeah.
Interesting story there too. So during pandemic, or maybe before that too, there used to be an app called Tribe. I don't think that app exists anymore, but it was basically Tinder for friendships. And they would ask a lot of questions and, based on their responses, they'll put you in groups of 3 and then they'll ask you to organize a meetup. So that way I met this girl, and when we were supposed to meet, she asked if she could bring her partner. I was like, sure. So we, both of us, like both couples, we met. Asian couple, they're an Asian couple, so Chinese Canadians, and that's how we met. And we have been so close that we were part of their wedding. We co-hosted their baby shower, and we're like 5 years later, we're still very good friends.
That's a great story. I'm very proud of you for doing that, because that involves stepping out of your comfort zone. For us, my wife's friend had a brother living in Vancouver, and he'd been here for 15 plus years. He was the only person we knew, and we had never met him in India. So when we met him, I saw his wife and I was like, you were in my class in 11th grade in Bombay.
Oh, wow.
And turns out she was.
World.
And yeah, I mean, it was a 140 student class, but she has a very distinctive face that you will not forget. Like, she looks very distinctive. So, we became friends, and how that really helped us is they introduced us to their group of friends, and all of them had been there for 15, 20 years. They had been well established. Because as a new immigrant, you end up just tending to meet other new immigrants, and then you're all in that same boat together.
Yeah.
But when we met people like that, they were essentially the type of people we were in India. So there was no talk of, my PR is pending, my passport hasn't come, I have to do survival job. They were talking about, hey, let's go camping, in the summer. So everyday conversations were very different. And for us, that became a different baseline than what most new immigrants face. So if I had gone to Surrey and my first friend would have been someone from a, working class from Surrey, then they would have said, oh, you should find a truck to drive or go work for the post office, and make $30 an hour. These guys were like, oh, you guys are, you have multiple master's degrees. Don't settle for anything below 150K. And so we got to experience a very different Canada because of that group of friends. And that, I think, gave us such a huge head start. And some of those friends have been on my show as well. They're successful entrepreneurs and doing some very interesting things. But I'm really grateful for that first friend who, let us into their group of like well-established locals. So.
Nice. Yeah, I think the other way we made friends was also through activities. So my partner and I both took skiing lessons and, met a couple there, and we're very close to them now. So same way. So that way we had like activity-based friends. So if you have to go skiing and hiking, we had, 2 couple friends. And then if you want to do, just brunching and chilling, that's another group. And we're completely okay with, compartmentalizing that, because there are a bunch of activities that we're into. So it doesn't have to be like one big group, but people that you can really count on.
Yeah, that's a cultural thing, isn't it? It's a hallmark of a low context culture like the US or Canada, where you can compartmentalize these. Whereas in India, it's a high context culture. So you have this one big group, everybody does everything together. If 3 people don't want to go for something, then the plan gets vetoed, right? So because I studied in the US and then went back to India, I was very comfortable with low context culture. And I had a lot of things that made my life a lot easier. Like, I knew how to drive on this side of the road. So I didn't struggle for 6 months to get a driving license, right? But for my wife, it was a lot of different cultural contexts. And especially she got a corporate job soon enough in Canada. So, it was also the Western workplace, which was also very different for her because she had worked in India her whole career. So how did you get your first job? And what was that first job?
Yeah, interesting story there too. So my partner actually saw that opportunity on LinkedIn. And so I applied to this opportunity. But apart from applying, I also sent this cold email to the person who posted that role on LinkedIn. And I still remember like I used that email as like a recipe card. So I was like, these are three ingredients. This is the three ingredients to my secret sauce. And, like listed out things that were not on my resume because of course a 2-pager resume cannot tell a story. It is only listing down the highlights, but it's the story where you can really learn more about the person. So this person was working at that company Spring, and this person actually forwarded it to the hiring manager. And that became like a really strong point for me to have the first conversation. Like you said, like sometimes you have to start with the survival job. That was not a survival job, but I had to really start from an entry level role. I grew really fast from there. So I started off as a program coordinator, but like within 3 years, I was the vice president at the company. So I grew really, really fast, primarily because of, what I was able to showcase in that time. So yes, the starting point was like a starting level salary and role, but
is the do you have Canada experience question, right?
Also COVID. It was 2020
also
when
COVID
was hiring. So for me, like it was just to, get my foot in the door and spread my wings.
Yeah. I got asked that question once and I said, I worked at a scale which is impossible in Canada because, the Indian set of challenges are beyond what I find. Canada has its own challenges. It's a different set of challenges. I've been part of a product launch that is used by 1 billion people with a B. And that's the RuPay card, the RuPay debit card. I was part of the launch for that project.
Amazing.
So I'm like, here, like the Canada experience doesn't matter when you've done things like that. But I actually had to dilute my resume significantly because if I would say, at that point, I had spent 6 years in family business and I had 3 tech startups of my own. So when you say founder, I had to take that out. So I would keep so let's say it was a product management role. I would only include the things I did for product management at that startup. And in the first one, my title was product specialist, then product manager, then senior product manager. And then they would instantly understand what that resume meant because I had diluted it so much. And it was all fact. I had done all of those things, but they were just a small part of my overall scheme of things. And I had to make a focused resume for that role. Otherwise, they would just not understand what my trajectory had been. So that was one unique challenge I faced. I eventually got hired by a data analytics company, but a couple of young co-founders were running the show. They got spooked during COVID, so I got laid off right when COVID started, and my family got stuck in India, and there was a lockdown, and that's how Diasporaa started. Because I said, okay, I'm going to mope about this for a week. And, why me? Why did I have to get laid off? Woe is me, all of that. I always give myself time to recover. But then let's see how we can turn this adversity and this 4-5 month quiet period without my son, without any disturbance. Because I knew it's not going to be a 2-week lockdown. I didn't know it was going to be 6 months or whatever. And then I said, what can I do in these few months which makes it the most productive time? And that's how my other startup, Diasporaa, was born, the platform for new immigrants. Did you ever come across that platform?
No,
when you were
actually.
living? Okay.
No.
Yeah. So it was mainly focused on 2 types of people. One was the people who come from a non-Punjabi and a non-student demographic, because those two can plug into certain aspects of their community and get acclimatized. It was for people who were coming out cold from India, they'd never lived abroad, and they wanted to meet other like-minded people who are also from Jaipur or Bhopal or Lucknow or wherever they're from. And the second was people moving from the States who had, they were not struggling. They were not economic migrants. They were there for the immigration peace of mind.
Yeah.
And they had all the money and willingness to enjoy Canada for what it was. So we would organize meetups. At the peak, it had over 5,000 members. And it also, I've probably done 150 meetups for people. There were 25 odd micro communities based on interest and where you're from and all of that. So something good came out of the lockdown for me. And then, of course, eventually I joined Amazon. But that was my lockdown project. So I said, if nobody's going to hire me, I'm just going to create a job for myself, and went back into the startup world. But
Yeah.
like the scale was exhausting. The burnout of running the whole thing, the whole platform by myself. I had to learn how to build a website. I had to learn how to do marketing, like all sorts of things. Not to mention keep this community going of thousands of people, and keeping them engaged and ensuring it adds value to them
Yeah.
throughout. So it was a burnout. So that's why now when I went back to entrepreneurship after Amazon, I said, I'm going to not do a tech scalable business. I'm going to do a boring old thing that's not being done well enough, and just do it very well and get my money out of that. And that's what I do currently.
That's
So,
incredible. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, let's take a short break now. And when we come back, I want to learn more about what you do with the adult learning and development programs. And we'll also talk about any advice that you may have for immigrants who are moving to Canada today. So we'll be right back after these messages.
Here's the deal. We gotta set ourselves up. See, retirement is the long game. We gotta make moves and make them early. Set up goals. Don't worry about a setback. Just save up and stack up to reach them. Let's put ourselves in the right position. Pre-game to greater things.
Start building your retirement plan at thisispretirement.org. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Hello, I'm Chris Erdman. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW, I sit down with inspiring entrepreneurs, creative minds, and game changers to uncover the real stories behind their business. On my show, Made of More, we explore the challenges that they've overcome, the breakthroughs that they've celebrated, and the mindset that drives them forward. If you're ready to unlock your full entrepreneurial potential, Made of More is the show for you, because here we know you are made of more. Every Wednesday at 8 a.m. on KKNW.
Get inspired every hour right here on Alternative Talk 1150.
Welcome back to Diasporaa on KKNW, where we share interesting stories of first-generation immigrants from South Asia. We're talking to Heena Narula, learning and development consultant. Before we jump back into the conversation, if you like listening to our show, please consider following us on Instagram or leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. So once you got to Spring Accelerator and you got promoted very quickly and grew, so basically reset to the senior role that you were doing in India before.
Yeah.
What brought on a shift from at that point into what you're doing now?
Well, I was laid off at the start of this year, so it's not something that I chose. But in hindsight, I think it has been super helpful for me to really understand like what I want to do next. And adult education has been a common thread right from when I started with Teach for India, because even though I was teaching in the classroom, I was also working with the teachers at that school. So that has been a common thread and something that I've really enjoyed, and also something that I kind of feel that I'm good at. So today I'm an L&D consultant at Dalberg Advisors. It's an international social impact consulting firm based out of US. It's a global organization, but US is where I work. And I get a chance to, design onboarding programs for new hires, upskilling programs for the team, and also like really look at performance management from a lens of learning and how we can equip our teams with the right tools so that, they continue growing into their roles.
I feel like everyone needs to go through a layoff once in their life because it teaches you resilience.
Yeah.
Layoffs aren't really a thing in India, right? Because I like to think, one, we have a bit more heart in how we treat our employees in India, but also because it's a growing country that companies are just growing all the time. Like, it's rare to see a company not grow and fail, especially at the big company level. And my wife eventually got laid off. I got laid off, and I think that definitely that experience made us stronger and more tenacious as people. But having said that, I didn't plan to go in this direction, but when you design upskilling programs, how much is AI on your radar right now? Because I feel like it's going to be probably the biggest reskilling required of humankind ever. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so AI has definitely been used a lot for enablement, like how you're building these
Yeah.
courses. But also, I'm a strong believer of relational design. I think, like, if I have to really, put words to my learning design philosophy, it really comes from building relationship with your learners. So AI cannot do that. So where I use
Right.
AI is to, like design the learning part of it. But when it comes to really deliver, that's where I really capitalize on the relationships that I have built with the audience. So AI has been definitely been a thinking partner, but not
Yeah.
delivery partner. And there are a lot of
Sure.
tools right now which can create videos. You just give them the script and there'll be an AI avatar
Yeah.
to create a video.
Yeah.
I do not think that those are very fruitful, because if a learner is not able to relate with the person they're listening to, they may not take
Sure.
away the message that you want them to take away. So for
Yeah.
me, like, it's a thinking partner, is an enablement tool, but not necessarily
Sure.
the only tool that can actually help with the
Yeah.
experience.
That's a very interesting perspective. Do you think as AI becomes more prevalent in our day to day life, your upskilling programs will need more content about how to use AI and stay relevant? So, will it be a subject matter of your programs?
Absolutely. So AI adoption is definitely one of those upskilling, programs that we are looking at, because everyone needs to be really proficient with these tools, learn more about it, and see like how they can integrate it into their daily life. At the same time,
Yeah.
understand the risks that come with it, and understand the need to cross check, because AI cannot be correct all the time. So
Yeah.
that level of human intervention is really important, and teaching
Yeah.
humans to go about it is definitely going to be a
Yeah.
part of my priorities in the time to come.
Yeah, I've been playing around with ChatGPT 5 and
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. I'll give you a short anecdote of, the AI making mistakes. I took a satellite image of Vancouver airport and I uploaded it to ChatGPT and I said, "Guess which airport this is?" So it said, "This is San Francisco airport." So then I said, I turned on the deep research mode and I said, "Please try again." It goes off, in deep research, comes back and says, "This is San Francisco International." So then I said, "Okay, now go online and find a satellite image of Vancouver International and compare the images to each other and then give me a new answer." And it says, "No, this is Vancouver International Airport." So I said, "Okay, so now why do you think you made this mistake?" So analyze yourself as to what you did wrong and what biases came in that resulted in this and how you will do a better job next time. So it went out and said, "Oh, I only referenced, the number of runways and the coast being next to it. I didn't, I had confirmation bias. I favored speed over rigor." And it said, "I should have checked the alignment of the runway and the shape of the terminal." And I was like, yes, this thing makes mistakes, but the way at which the pace at which it is learning, it is quite shocking. But I really agree with you that we have to use it along with it as an efficiency tool and more than just like letting it do all the thinking for you and you
Yeah.
becoming just a lazier or dumber person because of that.
Right.
I asked her to, we were talking about this in the last episode. I dumped all the videos of the episode so far and I asked her to suggest improvements for myself as an interviewer. And I asked her to pick a favorite episode. And it did all of that and gave me this crisp analysis of what I'm doing right, what I need more improvement in. So that type of analysis, I would have had to pay someone,
Yeah.
hundreds, if not thousands of dollars
Yeah.
for like a podcast coach to come and do that for me. So those kinds of things I'm seeing ChatGPT do very well.
Yeah.
And I am not too familiar with all the other Gemini and whatnot. But that was just an interesting story that I wanted to share. So to our listeners, if I get phenomenally better as an interviewer in the next few episodes, then what the cause of that is. So going back to our conversation about immigration, has the Indian makeup changed in Vancouver in the 6 years you've been there? Like, are you seeing different demographics coming in or different parts of the country being more represented, or is it kind of just all been the same?
I don't think I've observed any difference in the composition that way, but I have definitely seen a lot of people move over the past
Yeah.
5 years, like from our own networks. Like, for example, some people from my partner's B school moved in, like his B school seniors, they moved. So we built a community that way too, because a lot of people moved from our
Yeah.
circles or extended circles to Canada. And a lot of them choose Vancouver because weather wise, it's a lot more
Yeah.
easier on us. So yeah, I think I haven't noticed that as such, the change in composition that way. I don't think I've noticed that.
Yeah, I saw in my 4 years a lot more Indians from the States moving to Canada. And they were taking huge pay cuts, 50% pay cuts for the peace of mind that is immigration certainty. So there are countries like Canada where it's hard to get in, but once you get in, there's a path to citizenship. There's countries like the UAE where everybody gets in to work, but you're almost never going to become a citizen with equal rights as another citizen. The US is stuck in this weird spot where it's hard to get in and hard to naturalize. And I wasn't aware of the stress that people live through on a daily basis until I moved in this term to the US. This is my second innings in the US. Because in Canada, we are landed as permanent residents like you and then became citizens. But here, if you get laid off, you have 60 days to leave the country.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my job involves arranging 30-year leases for warehouses for Amazon. And when my own future in the country could be 60 days away at being over at any given time. I mean, even forget about work, like in your personal life, you're signing a 1-year lease. You're signing your kid up for a school for 1 year.
Yeah.
So that stress is real. And since the queue for the green card is by year of birth, in some categories, it's like the wait is 90 years, 90, for a green card. So we haven't even bothered to apply. So a lot of people are getting fed up of that. They've done very well in their careers here, but they can't take any really long-term decisions because of this. So they are, and of course, a lot of them, as soon as they get Canadian citizenship, they're leaving Canada, which kind of is not great news for Canada. But as it trickle down, I'm sure there'll be enough people who will end up staying there and contribute to the society. So now what happens to your original plan of staying for 2 years and then going back? Is that still on the cards at any point, or now you're
Not really. Not really. You have to think it this way that, there was a time when I was working 6 days a week and I had no life outside of work. Like I spent my entire 20s hustling so hard that I had
And
absolutely
that's common
no
in
hobbies.
India.
That's very common, right? And I think it also comes from a place of that there's so many talented people in the country that if you are not willing to stretch yourself, there'll be 10
Someone else
equally
is.
talented, equally
Absolutely.
competent, ready to take your place.
Yeah.
So for you to be relevant, for you to be really performing, you have to go the extra mile. So did that for a decade. And then I realized that this is not something I want to do for the rest of my life, and just needed a hard reset for some time. So when we moved here, work would end at 5 and then I would be like, okay, now what? There's so much time, right? Now what do we do? And so got into a lot of stuff, like got into biking, hiking, running, skiing, basically anything and everything that the city has to offer. And started realizing that, that the work can be just a part of your life, but not really the heart of your life. And that gave me the opportunity to really figure out, like, how do I want the rest of my life to be, and really like it here. And like you said, Vancouver is definitely one of the most beautiful places in the world to have that quality of life that you want.
Yeah. So several points to make here. One is there's fit and then there's Vancouver fit. I learned that when I was overtaken by a grandma on the Grouse Grind, which for our listeners is a really, really challenging hike in Vancouver. And by the time I got to the top, she took the gondola down and overtook me again.
Wow.
So I got overtaken twice by the same grandma in one hike. So I was like, man, I need to get fitter if I'm going to live in this city. The other thing is that, there's standard of living and then there's quality of life. In India, it's easier to get the high standard of living. You can afford help, you have a nice car, nice place to live, but the traffic is the traffic and the air is the air. And there's no way you can escape that. And all of those things will interact with you and, ruin your quality of life on a day-to-day basis. So like the question I asked you about going back, for me, the air quality and the quality of life And the third thing being the correlation between effort and result are the three things by which I wouldn't want to go back. Unless, like my family's health necessitates that or something, that's a different story. But otherwise, I would, for these reasons, keep me grounded in. And our part of the world, Pacific Northwest, the Lower Mainland, is really a blessed part of the world.
True.
It's beautiful, it's clean, it's
Yeah.
educated workforce, it's multicultural, well connected. There's no major threat of natural disasters all the time, like droughts in California or hurricanes in Florida. And it's just that it's the wonderful part of the world to be in. The other point I wanted to make is on that, the point you said about work-life balance. I read a quote which really shook me, and it said, 5 years later, the only people who will remember that you were in office till 10 p.m. is your family. And I was like, yeah, like I'm getting to spend so much time with my son here. I can't imagine taking him to a park at 4 in the afternoon on a weekday in Bombay. Like, one, there's not that many public spaces, and two, the air is not clean, and three, how will I get out of work at 4 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
So I think you hit a lot of nails on the head there. So moving on, what advice would you give a new immigrant who is moving, from India today, and like you, who's never been to Canada before, doesn't know anyone here? What would be the most important lesson you could share with them?
I would say embrace the change. If you're making this big life change, embrace it with
Yeah.
both arms. Don't question it. Because, a lot of times when you start questioning it, that's where you start feeling this form of discontentment. But embrace it. Embrace the opportunities that come along the way. Try out different things. Just get out of your comfort zone. Try things that you never even heard of. Like,
Yeah.
nobody in my extended family had ever learned about skiing. And
Yeah.
that, like, me getting to just experience that and make it such a big part of my life.
Yeah.
So just, it all comes about embracing the change. If you're willing
Yeah.
to embrace it, you will get a lot more in return. If you're willing,
Yeah.
if you're not willing to embrace it but rather question it, then it will
Yeah.
create that form of discontentment, which would always feel like,
Sure.
did we make the right decision? So
That's phenomenal advice. And I think you should, and I can introduce you to our first guest, Juhi Sinha. She and her husband are huge skiers. In Vancouver, I always played the role of a super connector because I knew so many people. And I
Nice.
kind of miss doing that here because I don't have that big a network yet. But they are the most outdoorsy people I've ever met in my life. And there's not a single sport that they don't do. So I
Nice.
think you guys will get along great. And this is a manual version of Tribe. I'm connecting you to them.
I heard Juhi's episode and I know about
Yeah.
grouse grinds. So my partner and I, we do grouse grinds twice a week all over the summer.
Wow.
So that would be really nice to connect with them and, maybe even
Yeah,
do it
so
together.
in that
Yeah.
episode, we talked about how she did it when she was 9 months pregnant. And I was like, I heard a rumor about that. Is that true? She's like, that's not true. I was 8 months pregnant. So that was one of the funny moments on the show so far. Okay, let's move on into our weekly segments. So, Mr. DJ, can you spin that wheel, please? So this one is called Maa Ka Khana, which in Hindi means mother's food. So, Indians are nostalgic about their food and passionate about their food. Is there something that you always have when you go home? Whether it's made by your mom or it's a local restaurant or something that you're very fond of and you associate with since your days in India.
Yeah, this dish called bangan ka bharta. It's basically eggplant curry of sorts. And
Yeah.
growing up, eggplant is something that not everyone likes. Like, none of my friends liked it, but I developed a taste for it. And I think my mom does a phenomenal job in making it. So every time I go back home, that's the first dish that I'll have.
That's great. For me, it's the humble vada pav of Bombay.
Nice.
So when I go to Bombay, there's a vada pav waiting at the airport for me in the car. I will post a recipe for bangan ka bharta as part of the show notes. So that brings us to the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed listening to Heena's amazing story. And thank you for listening to Diaspora. As always, remember to check out our show notes for links and more information about the things we talked about today. Diaspora is part of the Speaking Current network of shows and podcasts, all of which are dedicated to inspiring listeners to build lives of meaning, connection, and value. You can find the Speaking Current network of shows, including Diaspora, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube in video format. Lastly, if you know someone who has a story that can be shared on our show, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media handles. We'll be back next week with another interesting story from the South Asian diaspora. And until then, take care and stay curious. And Heena, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.